Welcome back to another exciting edition of Words, Images, and Worlds, and welcome back to my guest. Delighted to be talking with author and creator Richard Ashley Hamilton. Richard, thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me back, Jason. I'm going to try and keep it exciting, as you said. So I'm going
It's
to
always exciting. It's always
Yeah.
exciting. I mean, I'm just looking at the bookshelf behind you, and I'm already excited. I'm seeing the best of lots of things there that I love. I see Scoop right over your shoulder,
Oh,
conveniently
yeah.
placed. Yeah,
Conveniently
almost as if
placed.
it's whispering in your ear.
Yeah. What's that, Sophie? Plug you some more? Okay.
That's right. That's right. Well, we are talking Scoop in particular on this episode, but talking comics in general, science fiction, the paranormal, the process of writing comics, and all such things. I believe we had a conversation before that was focused on detective in
That's right.
particular.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Detective is my other series that is published by Maverick, which is the YA imprint of Mad Cave. So
Hmm.
the first volume of that came out in December. We've gotten really great reviews. I'm very happy about that. Everyone loves the art by our artist Marco Matrone, so there's no arguing that. It's beautiful. And it's kind of cool. I feel like we're starting to get a little bit of like an international following too. We just got somebody from New Zealand posting about it not too long ago. And
Nice.
I feel like post-apocalyptic noir is sort of like a universal language at this point. So that's cool. Working on volume two of that right now. I'm writing it. Marco's going to start illustrating it as soon as he finishes another project of ours that hasn't been announced quite just yet, but hopefully soon. And as for Scoop, that's also published by Maverick, and we are three volumes into that one. Volume three just dropped last month, and we are working at a breakneck pace on volume four, which should be out a little later. So yeah, lot of comics going on with Maverick, which makes me happy.
Yeah, yeah. Well, um, you're certainly generative in your creating with three projects going on, and I'm sure multiple other irons in the fire as well. So I'll ask about some of that balancing act. But for listeners out there that are maybe less familiar with Scoop, any background that you'd like to give for the first two volumes?
Yes, thank you. Scoop is about Sophie Cooper. She's a teenager growing up in my hometown of Miami, Florida, and she's an intern at a local TV news station. They're the worst, total amateur hour. The whole reason she's interning there is because her dad has been accused of this really heinous crime, and she wants to use the news to clear his name and, kind of get her regular teenage life back. And as an intern, she doesn't get to do any cool reporting stuff at first. She's like fetching coffee for people and like answering calls and doing all the scut work I used to have to do when I was an intern at CNN way back in the day. But pretty soon she starts investigating the weird tips and crank calls that none of the other reporters take seriously, stuff about UFOs over the Everglades and alligator people and ghosts and chupacabras. And pretty soon, So finds out it's all true and it is all somehow connected to the case against her dad. And so that's what she's trying to do now is just report all this weird sci-fi nonsense to the rest of the world, and hopefully exonerate her dad and get her old normal life back. So that's kind of the overarching story across all volumes of Scoop. Each volume kind of has its own sort of standalone mystery that kind of blends true crime and the paranormal. And so
Mhm.
by the time we get to volume three, Soph's been through some pretty heavy stuff at the end of the volume two. And so she and her mom are on a, girls' trip in Cuba, trying to like reconnect with their roots and sort of center themselves. And in typical Scoop fashion, it doesn't work exactly as planned.
Yeah, yeah. You have to have some experience from CNN to draw there, some little Easter egg kind of moments, or at least some informing behind the scenes of what happens in journalism that way.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm always dining out on this anecdote, so I apologize if I'm repeating myself. But my very first day. So first of all, I did not want to be an intern at CNN. I did not seek out journalism. I was a film student at the University of Miami, and I just couldn't get an internship on any movies that were shooting there that summer. But my parents knew someone who knew someone, and they're like, "Hey, we got you this internship at CNN, and it's all the same thing. It's all cameras and stuff, right?" I'm like, "No, it's totally different." But it pains me to admit this. My parents actually were right and did something great for me because it turned out that my first day at CNN was the day that Gianni Versace, the famous fashion designer, was murdered in front of his home in South Beach. And, there's since been like a Ryan Murphy show about it and all these other things, but it was a really huge deal at the time because the O.J. Simpson trial had only been a couple years before, and that sort of created the 24-hour news cycle. But there really wasn't a big, juicy story to kind of prop it up until poor Mr. Versace was murdered, and there was kind of a international element to it and the manhunt for his killer. And yeah, so my first day at CNN, I just walked in dressed to impress, and within 5 minutes, all the phones lit up, and the producer who was my boss like kind of snapped her fingers at me and was like, "You new kid, go ride a news van, go learn about journalism." So I didn't know what was going on, but it was like this whirlwind thing. I rode in the news van and we pulled up, and the his body was kind of still on the front steps. It was an active crime scene. It was pretty
Wow.
grisly. I like never want to, make light of it or anything because there's this tragic thing, but selfishly for me, yeah, it was this unbelievable experience and crash course in journalism, and kind of like what you were saying before. Maybe even more interestingly, like the stuff that happens behind the scenes and all the personalities and the politics and just the process of like how do you shape a story? How do you express it in a way that's interesting but also accurate? And
Mhm.
I think those questions were certainly valid then, and maybe even more so now when like maybe a lot of our journalism is more about sensationalism and less about the accurate representation of facts or even just questioning what facts are anymore. So yeah, it was really fertile stuff to dig into when I was a young guy, and even more interesting for me now, kind of setting Scoop against this backdrop of journalism, but make it a little sexier with aliens and spirits and stuff like that.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. The interested in paranormal, the way that you have found yourself gravitating to those areas. And of course, the third volume is called Sci-Fi Witness.
That's right.
Uh, yeah, so curious about those science fiction elements because this is also something we see in detective with post-apocalyptic dystopian fiction. Any threads there that you'd like to mention?
Well, I mean, really just all of it going back to my lifelong obsession with comics, and for as long as I can remember, I've been collecting comics and reading them and like really devouring them more than anything. And so I just was lucky to be exposed to a lot of those concepts at an early age, and they just always stayed with me. And kind of part of the genesis of Scoop was, yes, that experience at CNN, but also God, being in my 20s at the time, and my then girlfriend, now wife, and I being so into this show, Veronica Mars. Like it
Mm.
started right around the time we started dating, and so it's like very kind of woven into the fabric of our relationship. And when it was ultimately canceled after the third season, I just remember being like so depressed because we lived for this thing. And so I was like, well, I need to have a plucky teenage girl investigator in my life. And so, we took that and that CNN background, and that started to form Scoop. And I just always do this thing where I'm like, that real world stuff doesn't sound that interesting to me. So how can I spruce it up with like some sci-fi or some supernatural? And so that was kind of the last sort of contribution to what became Scoop.
Yeah, I know. I mentioned a bit ago that you have a couple of series, a couple of irons in the fire, series, however one enunciates that plural. Um, what is that like stepping from world to world, and anything in particular that you do to kind of fire your imagination back in a particular direction?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's a relief and sometimes it's like I kind of have to get back into the groove and it just there's kind of no rhyme or reason to it. I mean, I know for my process, when I'm actively working on one story, that's the time when I get the most ideas for the other story that I'm working on or for a new story. And like I'm not even considering what all the logic problems are in this new story. It's just shiny and different. And I'm meanwhile trying to like beat my head against the wall and scoop, trying to have that make sense. So of course I want to run it off and write something else. Something about Tective though with Bingo, our main character, she does like sort of very well, my attempt at like hard-boiled PI narration throughout. And I find that I'm able to slip into that really easily. Like it's kind of easy going back home to that. And I think that's probably just from that diet of not just sci-fi, but like, crime fiction and reading a lot of James Elroy and Donald E. Westlake and stuff like that. But yeah, it is nice to jump around between them and sort of flex different muscles. And then the other project that Marco, the artist on Tective, and I are doing is sort of like a historical fiction, again, with a bit of like a fantastical bent to it. And so that's like a real palate cleanser, going
Mm,
between like Scoop, which is mostly set in the real world and in the present, but with like sci-fi elements, or Tective, which is in this weird far future that's like more dystopic, more noir, and then this other thing, which is just like something else completely. So I prefer it that way. I think I just knowing my personality, I would get bored, and I have gotten bored working on the same thing for too long in the past. So this
yeah.
it's just the right amount of schizophrenia for me, I think.
That may go into answering the question of sustaining a story over time, unfolding volume to volume. So, uh, getting other ideas as palate cleansers sounds like a great way to sustain that and to keep focused with it and carry it out. Anything else that you'd like to mention that helps you world build, not for just one volume, but now you mentioned also volume four on the way and others moving forward?
Well, I think the other benefit of like jumping around between different projects is sometimes that distance is good for when you come back to a story with maybe fresher eyes than you'd had before. So I think getting that perspective really helps. And like let's say I've outlined a story and then I've gone off to work a little bit on another project for a week or two, and then I come back to that outline, I look at it, I'm like, well, this doesn't make sense. And I had been patting myself on the back a couple weeks ago, but I'm like, this is not going to work. So you got to get back in there and start, you know, almost like an HGTV home renovation show, just like start ripping stuff out and putting new stuff in, new supports. Um, so there's that aspect to it. But I also like, I'd say other than CNN, the other really cool job I had was working at DreamWorks Animation for a stretch, and specifically on the How to Train Your Dragon films, and learning a lot from the writer director Dean DeBlois, who I think of as my mentor. And there's a lot of world building in those movies, especially jumping from the first movie to the second. And I just was so lucky and got like this kind of like ringside seat at Dean and his process, and seeing that a lot of the world building he did, all of it actually was character first. It was all character based, and it was all based on the relationship between Hiccup and Toothless, a human boy and his dragon, and just how their friendship kind of unlocked this world of possibilities. And so all of the cool world building you saw in Dragon 2 with like Hiccup's fire sword and like his flight suit and just even the different places they were able to explore, it was all born out of that relationship and all born out of their characters. And so that's the thing that I always go back to when I'm doing the world building in Scoop, or especially in Tective, which really is like imagining a whole new world, like our unique take of post-apocalyptic stuff and our unique take of noir. It's really just looking at it through the lens of character. And whenever
Mhm.
we hit like a roadblock, or usually it's me hitting the roadblock, I just have to remind myself of like, what would Dean do, and go back and look at it through character. And I think the benefits of that are one, it it keeps it very specific and germane to your story, so it kind of prevents the world building from getting too generic. And I think the other thing is that you're also, in a sense, building in stakes when you do that, because if all the world building is a reflection of your character, then any challenges that she or he encounters in that world is necessarily going to be a reflection of them and whatever crunchy, creative, crisis they're going through as a character in that moment, if that makes
Mhm.
any sense.
Yeah, yeah. Very well said too. Crunchy creative crisis. I like that.
I thank you. I'm a
Uh,
sucker for alliteration. Again, that's the comic books and Stan Lee talking through me, I think.
that's right. That's right. The alliteration and poetry of comics, according to Stan Lee. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's great use of language when you only have so many words that fit in a panel.
Right.
Uh, Curious about what a longer story allows you to do. It sounds like character forward is part of that. So certainly expanding on characters and getting to know them well. I imagine it would be very difficult to say goodbye to a character that you spent that much time with.
It's really difficult. I'm going through that now a little bit with some of these projects. But you hit the nail right on the head. I mean, the to me the ultimate benefit of doing like the long form serialized storytelling is just like how much you get to know those characters and hopefully care about them.
Hmm.
I mean, I think about like, all the comics I read as a kid and still read now, and I couldn't quite tell you like who the X-Men fought in any given issue, but I could tell you what was going on between Scott and Jean, or Scott and Emma, or what was going on with Bobby, or like any of those things, or Kitty, and like the emotional stuff is ultimately all the things that really stuck with me. Um,
Hmm.
and So that was like very much a concerted effort, especially when we started working on the third scoop. I got to talk early on with Mad Cave's editor in chief, Mike Martz, and he sort of asked, what did I want to do with the third volume? And I guess like at this phase in my life, I wanted it to be like the most emotional volume yet. Like the first one is hopefully entertaining and it's all about introducing a world. The second one is a little bit about kind of exploring more of like the consequences of Sophie's sort of dogged investigation for the truth at any cost. And so it's a little more, wound up being a little plottier than maybe I had intended. And then so with the third volume, I like really wanted to kind of make the plot almost as like paper thin as I could, to just I mean, I hope there's still a story that's interesting and has twists and turns and all that, but I really wanted to put the primacy on the characters and on their emotions. And so for whatever reason, I found it to be the easiest scoop volume to write. And I just felt like the characters were telling me what to say and I was just transcribing it. I don't know if that answered your question at all or not, but yeah, I'm gonna stick with that.
I like it. I like it. Any shout outs that you'd like to give to the creative team on the book?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Well, I already mentioned Mike Martz, who is awesome and has a great guiding hand. And our other editor on the book is Christina Harrington, who is even more directly involved in it. And Christina, like, just gives the best notes in the world and makes the story so much better, and therefore makes me look like a better writer than I am. So I'm very much indebted to her. And then the rest of our Scoop Troop is our art team, and Pablo Andres illustrated volume 3. He also illustrated volume 2. And if you hold those books side by side, there was a couple years in between them. Pablo's art has only gotten even better, and the stuff he's doing in volume 4 is even better still. So like I'm just gonna hold on to his coattails and ride on them as long as I possibly can. He's awesome. And our colorist in volume 3 is Simon Robbins. And volume 3 is kind of interesting in that this was sort of the first volume where Pablo, Simon, our colorist, and Dave, our letterer, all got to work together from the get-go. Like the team was set before we started, producing the book. And I don't know if it's just me, but like I just feel like their stuff, it just gels in a way in volume 3 that it worked great together in volume 2, but like something about volume 3 just really kicked in a high gear. So I'm biased, but I do think there's something going on there. And I think from what I've seen of volume 4, it's only gotten better. So yeah, that's kind of the main team. But I think I'd also, I'd be remiss if I wasn't mentioning like Mad Cave's PR team and marketing team and sales team and all the wonderful folks who make this conversation possible and do all these other things
Hmm.
to get scoop into people's hands. So it I think that's probably my favorite aspect about working with Maverick and Mad Cave is like the books are beautiful, they're very well produced, but it's like you really do feel like you're part of a team. And, writing in particular can be such a solitary exercise. So when you feel like you're part of a team and everyone's got the same goal and everyone believes in the same story, it's really gratifying.
Yeah, absolutely. And on the consumer side, on the reader side, I also appreciate both the quality, the variety. So yeah, glad to speak with you on it, and glad that science fiction is getting such a nice focus in comics in your work. There's such a range of what comics can do.
Thanks. I completely agree. And I just find that the crazier our real world gets, the more I want to like not retreat into science fiction or fantasy, but I just like I feel like it's the only way I can process it is to like take some of those themes and couch it in genre, and then somehow that just makes it a little easier for me to write about it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I suppose we are down to the final question, unless there's anything that I've missed. Is there anything that we haven't shared that you'd like to make sure to include?
I do. It's somewhat unrelated, but sort of related, and that is I'm going to hold it up. Mad Cave did this awesome thing. They made this benefit book called LA Strong. It's to benefit comic creators who were impacted by the wildfires we had out here in LA at the start of the year. I was lucky enough to put a little 3-page detective story in here with Marco and with Dave Sharp. Um, and we kind of got the band back together and put that in here. So we're proud of that. But really, all of the contributions, there's like a murderer's row of comic book talent that's contributed to this. And there's some really great writing, some unbelievable art, and all proceeds still go to benefiting those creators who are impacted by the fires. So if you haven't yet, if any of your listeners are willing to pick up this book, their hard-earned money is going to go to a really good cause. And I always think it's nice to give back to our community. So that's my plug for LA Strong. It's a beautiful book.
Yeah, yeah.
That's it.
Cool, cool. Well said, and glad to support your work and glad to support that project. Where can we go and find these wonderful things?
Well, I believe LA Strong is available in comic shops everywhere, so always support your LCS. If you can't find it there, you can order it through them because Lunar distributes Mad Cave and Maverick, so we're okay there. Or you can go to
Mm.
um, the Mad Cave website. I think it's madcavestudios.com. But all their stuff is available, especially like the Maverick books. They're available in Barnes Noble, Amazon, and all that. I like to go to bookshop.org because they often have the same discounts as those larger stores, but your purchase is actually supporting like a mom and pop bookstore, not one of these bigger chains. But you do you, however you want to get the books. That's all that matters. That's what makes us happy. But that's just my suggestion.
Yeah, yeah. And where might we find more about you in terms of social media, convention spaces, anything that like that you'd like to mention?
Yeah, I am on social media, but not well. So I mean, you can find me on Instagram at just my full name at Richard Ashley Hamilton. I'm on Twitter and Facebook, but not too regularly. But I do go to conventions. I'll be at San Diego in a couple of months. I may be at New York, and I may be at the Miami Book Fair again towards the end of this year. But not that hard to find. You know, just you reach out, and especially if you want to talk about comics, I always love talking comics with people.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, always glad to talk with you in this space and always glad to support the work and may the creating, may the world building continue.
Thank you, Jason. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me back on.